We begin with a Fox News alert. An international manhunt is underway. German authorities are searching for the man they believe drove a truck through a Christmas market in Berlin. 12 people died, many more were hurt. That suspect is 24-year-old Anis Amri of Tunisia. He was seeking asylum and was already on the radar as a potential terrorist. And now evidence his fingerprints have been found on the door of the big rig used in that massacre. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself. National Security Council staff member under Presidents Bush and Obama, Jillian Turner. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the new opinion page editor for the Washington Times. I'll be taking autographs from him later. Charlie Hurt is here. He's outnumbered. Boy, there's a lot going on in the world.
Oh my goodness, it's incredible. And this, everything, out of Turkey and Berlin, it's just really, really terrifying.
A good time to have a great editor on board.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, thanks for being here. Now the news. The Christmas market in Berlin, where 2 Americans were among those injured in Monday's attack, is reopening today under tight security. And more chilling details emerging about the refugee from Tunisia who is now Europe's most wanted man. Reports he had raised red flags about his ties to known radical Islamic terrorists, and at one point was scheduled to be deported, but a mistake with paperwork kept him in Germany. His brothers are speaking out, urging the suspect to give himself up. Watch.
I'm shocked like every Tunisian citizen who heard about it. When the police came to the house to take my mom, then we knew it was my brother Anis. If he is watching me now, I just want to blame him for what he has done.
The senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott joins us now live from Berlin.
Harris, we are at the reopened Christmas market here in Berlin, the scene of the terror attack. We'll show you around in a moment, but let's give you the absolute latest regarding the investigation into the attack and the suspect. That search is intensifying for the 24-year-old Tunisian man. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, under a lot of fire right now, is just in a press conference. She says she thinks the authorities are close to nabbing him. There were raids overnight and through the days. Local media, however, says they think the police are still searching for clues. Reports also say that the suspect, Anis Amri, very much on the German radar for the past year or so. He was arrested once, he was detained once, he was monitoring, apparently, according to one report, offering to commit an attack in Germany. And reportedly, this guy was also on the U.S. radar. He's said to be on a no-fly terror list. Said to have been monitored, checking out an online bomb-making site, as well as communicating with terror figures. Now, Harris, back here at this market, I'm going to step aside, let my cameraman Mal James show you the scene. It was between these Christmas market stalls on Monday night that 25-ton truck came barreling through at about 40 miles an hour. We talked to one person who was right next to it. He said it was terrible. Right now, you can see a lot of crowds, but I gotta say, I've lived in Europe for 25 years, and this is the saddest Christmas market I have ever been to. No music, no joviality, a lot of sadness, respect being paid at a couple of makeshift memorials. Here's what a few people told us about the scene today. Take a listen.
Yeah, we will survive, and also with our values, we will survive.
It's just so terrible what happened, and yeah, I think.
But life goes on here.
Life goes on. Berlin lives on.
Harris, we have been told that 2 Americans were hurt in the attack. One has been released from the hospital. The latest word we're getting is another is still in the hospital. And we have been told that of the 12 who are still in the hospital, all of them are in serious condition. Back to you.
Greg Palcott, thank you very much. Charlie, as we look at that scene with that market reopening and we hear how silent it is, you do hear the voices and the people there persisting. It sits in the shadow of an important post-World War II church. It's iconic, that market.
Yeah, and God bless those brave Germans who are going back out there, even though, probably they're not exactly in the Christmas spirit, but going out there with the fighting spirit. And, I think that's probably the best you can ask for in a situation like this. Not only is this a massive intelligence failure, but unfortunately it's also an immigration failure. We will see what sort of price Angela Merkel pays for it politically, but it really does shine a bright light on a problem that we unfortunately have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, as you look at that, you could imagine that happening in this country. We saw the same thing in Nice earlier this year. You could imagine that happening. We watched Angela Merkel in her news conference. I know it's a translation. I can't imagine it's easy to contain your anger, though, if you're living in Germany.
Yeah, I think that's the $64,000 question. I'm actually happy to have Jillian on the couch for this very reason, because if I were German right now, I would be I'm angry, and I'm not a German, that this man wasn't deported because he didn't have a passport. There was knowledge from security intel that he had ties to extremists and extremist forces all around the world. He came from Tunisia. He wasn't radicalized then, according to his brother, but somehow became radicalized and then committed a terror attack with the knowledge from security intel, knowing that this man was an extremist, and obviously successfully executed it. So I think there's a frustration globally in the breakdown of exactly what's going on.
Look, Jillian, I'll always understand that you can't watch them all. They have many, 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 many more / fewer resources over there than we do, because they've let so many people in that they can't keep up with.
Well, and in this instance, what's so horrifying is that he was being watched. He was under surveillance for a long period of time. I think that, to go to Charlie's point, I think more than an intelligence failure, you can actually argue it wasn't an intelligence failure at all. We had the information right there in front of us. The United States put out a warning just last month around Thanksgiving, talking about Christmas markets in Europe and warning Americans to stay vigilant. So the intelligence was there. This was a failure. This was like a sort of administrative paperwork failure that falls more to law enforcement. Why was this guy not deported? The answer we now know is because he didn't have a passport, so the Pakistanis didn't want to take him back. So when you deport someone, you have to send them somewhere. Where do you send them? You can't choose a country at random. You've got
because they don't have a Guantanamo Bay.
Exactly. So you can't, the Pakistanis are not going to...
So are we going to look like that if Gitmo closes?
That's a very real possibility. Fortunately, I think, though, when we, here in the United States, we haven't made some of the grave mistakes that Germany has made, such as taking in millions of people in the last year without vetting them. We've got very good vetting procedures in place here, and President Obama and this administration has been talking about something like 10,000 Syrian refugees coming in over the next year.
They want to bump
it. I don't think the Trump administration will. But anyway, it's nowhere near, it's not comparable to the number that have flooded into Germany.
So, Kennedy, I hear what Jillian's saying, but when you ask people, they actually don't feel good about the vetting process at all.
No, they shouldn't. And I think there's a sort of an implicit distrust with the government. And these programs tend to be so bureaucratic and bloated, which is the case with most government systems, that they do tend to fail. But here, as we saw in the United States, and I know I brought this point up several times, it's not an intelligence failure. You had the guy, but the question is, and what I want to know is, how many other people are there exactly like this? How many people are there who are on the radar, who maybe haven't committed crimes that are actionable, but this guy was a dirtbag. I mean, his dad said that he was a drug addict and a drug dealer, and, and he had been arrested for assault. He had supposedly burned down a school in the past. He made his way to Germany through Italy. And the whole thing is so questionable because even Tunisia, when the government was contacted, they tried to disavow him and say that he wasn't even Tunisian. So obviously, if you're not having partnerships in the Middle East that cooperate with these governments, you're never going to solve these kinds of problems. And, I have to say, I'm actually glad in this country that we do have Second Amendment rights, which they do not in Western Europe. They're silly with guns, but good people can't get them. You can't track every single person. You can't always defend or expect law enforcement to defend you from them.
Real quickly, Newport Richey, Florida today, the authorities there have picked up a guy. His mother called. She said he was making threats. And the sheriff there had said we may have stumbled upon a potential terrorist situation. They don't know. They're putting the story together, but you ask how many of these people are in this country. This is a story that's breaking right now in Florida, coming together. We'll report the facts as we learn them, but lots of questions. President-elect Donald Trump is speaking publicly for the very first time about the Berlin attack, suggesting he might go forward with his campaign pledge to temporarily ban some Muslims from entering the United States. A reporter asked him if the Christmas market massacre is making him reevaluate that proposal, along with the plan to create a registry.
You know my plans all along, and I've been proven to be right, 100% correct. What's happening is disgraceful. It's an attack on humanity, and it's got to be stopped.
All right, we come out and we talk about this idea. We saw President-elect Donald Trump tweet about this, but this is the first time, as I said, we've heard from him publicly. What are your thoughts?
Well, whether or not this proves, whether or not he's 100% correct about this, and this proves that he's been correct all along or not, I think that most Americans believe that this does prove that he is correct. And this may, obviously this raises all sorts of questions for a lot of people. But, as absurd as this notion is that the reason that this guy in Berlin couldn't be deported is because he didn't have a passport. Mm-hmm. Those policies are the same policies we have in this country, where if you can get across the border and into the country and walk up to a border agent and say, give me an appointment with a deportation judge, that's all you need, and you get to stay. And so it is a real problem. Not only there, it is a real problem here, and I think there is political support for doing something.
One of the things on Outnumbered we'd watched over the last year or so is Meghan McCain's needle move on where she was with Donald Trump on certain issues. This was an issue, though, that you felt strongly that he hit the nail on the head. Why?
But because I think there's a frustration with so many Americans when there's a terror attack, and you see in the record that they were being flagged, that they had been, that family members had reported these people before, that they've been flying back and forth to the Middle East, which seems like with absolutely no ramifications whatsoever. And I am for stricter vetting. I think Europe is a warning, and a lot of Americans heard this loud and clear. Jason Miller said this might upset those with their heads stuck in the politically correct sand, but nothing is more important than keeping our people safe. Who wouldn't second and echo those sentiments as well? And it may not be politically correct, and I understand that, but I think American safety has to, no pun intended, trump everything else.
Vetting, I think extra increased vetting is not in and of itself not politically correct. I think it's about how you present this to the American people. So I think that there was a great uproar when President-elect Trump talked about a Muslim ban. But if you break it down and it becomes evident that what that really means is more careful vetting, I think a lot of Americans.
Well, and you heard me say some, because he has really pinpointed what he meant, and I think we want those criminals who are here illegally to leave, and those who have become criminals since they've been here beyond being here illegally and done all sorts of things. I don't think anybody would argue with that. I'm just curious, what does strict, extra, deeper vetting look like? And can we as Americans agree to that?
I think it gives us a false sense of security, frankly. I really do. And when you talk about banning all Muslims, well, when you ask someone when they come into the country, are you Muslim? Like, what if they're wearing a cross and they say no? Like, what test are you supposed to logically give people? It does give you a false sense of security. You may be keeping some people out, and, 95% of them are good people. We've all had friends who have been targeted for the way they look or their last name. Megan and I have a really good friend who's a journalist who's worked in Syria and Iraq, and he cannot get into this country. He cannot get a visa, and he's a good, hard-working person. But because of, where he's worked in the past and what your last name is, and it's really frustrating when you know those people personally. The people in this country are the ones who seem to be more problematic.
All right. Out of everybody on this couch, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm probably the only one who's been racially profiled. And recently, they were looking for somebody. I'm not offended if this is a legitimate search, because, seriously, I live here, I'm an American before I'm anything else. So I hear what you're saying, but I do think we need to come up with some parameters. I just don't know what people will be comfortable with. I'm okay with it as long as it, has some structure to it. When I've been stopped and they're looking for a woman driving my kind of car, and I did kind of look like her, that's structure.
Let the CIA and the FBI figure it out and use warrants and do those things lawfully. I don't have a problem with that. And we were talking the other day, be aware of your surroundings. Yeah. I have a problem when the government's doing it, when people are looking around, taking into account who's around them. I don't have a problem with that at all.
You and I rarely agree on things, but I will say
that's not true. When we disagree,
excuse me. But I will say the question of homegrown wolves as well will not be rectified with this ban.
Yeah, big hole.
Good point.
Big hole.
Well, she may have a taste for running again. But her own party may have a flavor for something fresh and new. See the significant number of Democrats who don't want Hillary Clinton to run for the White House again, according to a key poll. And the sons of President-elect Donald Trump are facing some new questions about their charitable efforts and a particular fundraiser. And we will quench your thirst for more Outnumbered when we go overtime online. FoxNews.com/Outnumbered tap overtime. Go to Facebook.com/OutnumberedFNC for us to pop up live on Facebook, and tweet Little Birdie when you want to. We're coming right back.
Hillary Clinton may still harbor White House hopes, but a vast majority of voters don't want to see her run again. A new Suffolk University USA Today poll showing 62% of Democrats and independents say Hillary should not throw her hat into the ring for 2020. Just 23% saying they are excited about the thought of Clinton making a third White House run. All this as a Pew Research survey shows a whopping 97% of all voters would cast the exact same vote they did on Election Day, including 99% of Trump voters and 96% of Clinton voters. All this suggesting that voters are ready to move on from Hillary. But will she move on? I didn't even know this was something that was being thrown around in Democratic circles. But I was like, what are you going to do? Are you going to prop her up like Weekend at Bernie's and just run her every single election?
Wow, that is a visual, Megan.
Like, I am so blown away at the idea anyone anywhere.
Well, I have some ideas for her, though, if she wants to do this. Is she going to promise that she'll do it for free? Because you can't have $1 billion again, because that didn't work the first time. And let taxpayers and supporters keep their cash in their pockets. In the next time that she decides to run, is she going to go to places like Wisconsin and Minnesota and like meet the people? I used to live in those areas.
Actually,
not many people go there. And then my third is that, you know, is she going to be able to rewind the clock on all the things that we already know? Like the email server? No. Like, can she hit us with like a forgetful wand?
Yeah. Especially if she's going to run against Donald Trump again in 4 years. I mean, I could see if he was coming out of office and it was somebody else.
See, I think
to go head to head again, I don't know. I'm like Megan. I had no idea this was a thing. I thought it was beyond.
This is like when Bell Bottoms came back, and I didn't.
I'm not a Hillary Clinton supporter, but I think it's just cruel. I mean, the thought of her running and losing again and again with the recount. She lost electors. She's
been running for 20 years.
Donald Trump says we're going to get sick of winning. She obviously doesn't get sick of losing. She has to stop the talk.
But it's kind of sad that their two best options right now are Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And they're both going to be almost as old as Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 4 years.
Or the other Bernie. I mean, that really is Weekend at Bernie's.
But I just think
it's like an exercise in futility that Democrats can't come up with anything else. As a Republican, I love it. Keep running her. Run all day long. Run Chelsea as well. See how much America loves the Clintons. They're over it.
I think you should applaud her right now, because for the first time in her life, she's actually
hiking so much in Rhode Island.
She's taking weird selfies in the woods. Like, we're trying to find
but I think
maybe she just wants to disprove Donald Trump's claim that she has no stamina. If she ran again, you really
that would do it. But I think the real thing that's going on here is that the Clintons are desperately trying to make people think that they might still be in the White House someday, because their donations at the foundation are going to dry up, and the whole operation is over if there isn't the sort of promise that one of them is going to be in the White House again. So unless it's Chelsea that they're going to put forth, I guess they have to put somebody out there.
I just feel bad for the people in the Democratic Party who are younger with fresh ideas, who may have a dream, and that dream being quashed by people like Nancy Pelosi, who will not let go of office for anything at this point. And now you have a woman who's run, Jillian said, for 20 years, whatever the number may be. I mean, what about the next generation and their hope?
Yeah,
and
that's look at the governor of California. I mean, come on, and believe me, I love our golden Americans more than anyone. But at some point, you have to introduce a new generation of trailblazers.
Well, that's why I think suffocate them forever. Yeah. And Republicans are actually really good at this. Like, there's a lot of, I could point to easily a dozen new young talent, senators, congressmen, and women that
I admire.
Young,
you mean under 50.
I mean under 40.
I mean just comparing the landscape to Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and even So
Time Magazine asked President Obama, so who is the next generation of leaders in the Democratic Party, and he named 4 or 5 people. I'd never heard of any of them. But
is that a good sign, though?
Because
I don't know.
So young. We hadn't heard of him before the 2004 Democratic National
and so now
Convention.
he's also talking about maybe he's going to make it his business once he leaves office to try and help kind of mentor and nurture that next generation of folks. That would be the best use of his time.
Yeah, he can't start a foundation, so he's got to do something.
When he ran against Hillary Clinton, the nation needed new car smell. I mean, that wasn't even subtle.
It's mean.
Kind of tawdry.
See, I'm starting to feel bad for her.
They're straight out of luck, and I love it. President-elect Donald Trump making some new appointments, the 2 advisors he selected who could end up bringing some big changes to the economy, and what they say about his governing style. Plus, the Trump team now weighing the role his family members will play in the White House, the optics when it comes to possible conflicts of interest, and whether Mr. Trump has any flexibility with laws against nepotism.
Fox News alert now on President-elect Donald Trump's new appointments. This morning, he named former campaign manager Kellyanne Conway as his choice to serve as counselor to the president. And some big economic-related announcements as well. The president-elect has selected advisors on trade and federal regulations. Mr. Trump tapped billionaire investor Carl Icahn as special advisor to the president on overhauling federal regulations, and announced plans to create a national trade council in the White House. To lead it, economist Peter Navarro, a vocal critic of U.S.-China trade policy, and both choices coming with some controversy. Peter Ducey is live with the news in Palm Beach, Florida. Not a bad assignment. Talk money to me, Peter.
It's not too bad here, Harris, but as you just mentioned, a major part of the Trump platform during the primaries and the campaign was trade, particularly renegotiating NAFTA and withdrawing the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And now we know who at least one of the major players in renegotiating these trade deals is going to be. It's Dr. Peter Navarro, a famous critic of China, who is also a UC Irvine professor with a Harvard PhD. He's going to be the new White House National Trade Council head, and he's going to advise the next president during trade negotiations while also helping him assess what's possible here manufacturing-wise. How did Mr. Trump find out about Dr. Navarro, you may ask? Well, the president-elect says this, quote, "I read one of Peter's books on America's trade problems years ago and was impressed by the clarity of his arguments and thoroughness of his research." Mr. Trump has also now announced who's going to help him cut red tape. It's the billionaire investor Carl Icahn, who gets the title of Special Advisor to the President on Regulatory Reform, even though he plans to offer advice as an individual, not technically part of the government. Now, some big proponents of Wall Street reform have expressed concern that Mr. Icahn is going to be offering advice to the president about how to regulate an industry that he is still actively participating in. But Icahn says he just thinks regulations and the paperwork that come with them take up too much time that small business owners could be using for something more productive. So he wants to free them up. During the campaign, Icahn is one of the people Trump mentioned most frequently as a smart money guy who was on board with the things that Trump was talking about, and now he's on board with the next administration, at least in some capacity. Harris?
Peter, thank you. Go grab your sunblock, my friend. See ya. All right. So Carl Icahn has just wrapped up a CNBC interview, and from that we're learning some
that
nuggets.
Poor thing.
And you and I were reading through some of the verbatim of what was coming. What popped to you?
His talk about EPA regulations, specifically having to do with oil refineries, being absurd. I share his contempt for many of the EPA regulations, particularly the ones that the president has put on the books by executive action. And I think it's fantastic that he has specific partners in mind to roll back a lot of these regulations. The fact that Carl Icahn is specifically targeting the one that benefits him directly as the first one he wants to tackle, that's a little bit disconcerting to people who are dubious of crony capitalism, because Carl Icahn, the billionaire, of course, owns an oil refinery. People talk a lot about Donald Trump and his children divesting from their businesses. They're all going to be really busy, particularly the president-elect. Carl Icahn, he's just got this sort of swinging title. He's going to have plenty of free time to roll back those regs and make a bunch of money on oil.
But it's okay because he's not going to get a salary, so he can. It's totally fine.
I'll take his salary.
Swinging title. By the way, he was asked about that in this interview, and Carl Icahn says he does not have specific duties, but will talk to Mr. Trump as he has before.
Yeah, I think, and then of course Peter Navarro is also going to raise a lot of eyebrows, especially on the Republican side, because
he's a Democrat,
and a lot of people.
He's a frustrated Democrat.
A lot of conservative Republicans in Washington are really worried about the issue of trade and whether Donald Trump is going to be a protectionist. I mean, if you listen to the way he campaigned, he could sort of fall into either category. I happen to sort of think that a guy like that is not going to be anti-trade. trade completely. It's somewhere in the middle. But the picking Peter Navarro is certainly
What must China be thinking, though, Charlie? China is sitting here trying to, and we've talked about the madman doctrine and whether or not Trump is trying to seem like an unpredictable, crazy person. And with a pick like Peter Navarro, who has been so vocal, is such a vocal opponent to the Chinese model of trade, that they must be going, what are the next 4 years going to be like for us?
I think that being perceived as a madman is crucial to the art of the deal. And I think, and Donald Trump obviously operates like that.
So
and the Chinese have to understand
you
that.
said, though, it hit me, resonated with me, actually. And I wonder if the American people wouldn't like it. And that's the fact that you really can't put Mr. Trump in a category because of his choices.
Yeah.
And that really makes him an outsider, Megan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me, I loved the Taiwan call, as we talked about on the show.
With the Taiwanese president.
With the Taiwanese president. And I love that Donald Trump is shaking things up, because I don't think we should be beholden to the, geopolitical bullying of China for a long time. That being said, this guy, Peter Navarro, some of the reading I've been doing, I mean, this could have real ramifications for our trade deals, which
That's right.
there's a lot of bottom lines I don't think people realize, like buying a TV could exponentially rise in cost, just an everyday thing. So I have a lot of questions going forward, and I think the American public has a right to know all the
So here's the
details
overarching question.
of these plans.
Are you willing to take a risk on something fresh and new that you can't necessarily categorize and just see how it plays out? Or do you really need all of those questions answered?
I'm willing to take a risk, but I also have never been one of these people that was under the illusion that we can somehow stop the technological revolution, that a lot of these manufacturing jobs can come back. I mean, technology has progressed on. So if it means sort of denying that fact and having ramifications on the average American's bottom line, yeah, I'm going to have a problem with that.
As long as we don't start a trade
But
war.
why do we need a new, I thought we're draining the swamp and we're getting rid of bureaucracy. Why do we need a National Trade Council? We already have the National Economic Council in the White House.
That's
We've
an
got the
interesting
Council of
question.
Economic Advisors in the White House. We've got the U.S. Trade Representative across the street, works hand in glove with the White House. Why do we need new councils? I'm not necessarily critical of it, but why are we adding more levels of bureaucracy?
It's a very
on top
good
of this
question.
issue? I don't know the answer.
Kennedy, do you know?
I know that when people are about to ascend to power, the lure of it is so intoxicating they can't help but sip from the chalice.
Say that.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump's team, they're going to be doing a lot of things, including taking a closer look at the role his family may end up playing once he's in office. This after reports that Eric and Donald Jr. were connected to a charity fundraiser tied to the inauguration. Team Trump quickly putting out a statement distancing the sons from it. Now, meantime, his team is suggesting anti-nepotism laws include some flexibility. Here's senior advisor and incoming counselor to the new president, Kellyanne Conway.
The anti-nepotism law apparently has an exception if you want to work in the West Wing, because the president is able to appoint his own staff. So, of course, this came about to stop maybe family members serving on the cabinet.
Right.
But the president does have discretion to choose a staff of his liking. And so if that actually is true and that legal advice holds, then that will open up a realm of possibilities.
All right, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich also commenting in a radio interview.
In the case of the president, he has a broad ability to organize the White House the way he wants to. We have never seen this kind of wealth in the White House. And so traditional rules don't work. And then we're going to have to think up, a whole new approach.
All right, we'll see how those nepotism laws apply and how they sit with the country. Charlie, nepotism law, of course, signed in 1967 because LBJ hated Bobby Kennedy so much he wanted revenge for JFK appointing his brother as Attorney General.
Yeah. Well, we all knew that there were going to be all these entanglements with Donald Trump, and voters knew it when they voted for him. And I expect we'll be talking about this and trying to figure all this stuff out for months going forward. I don't think it really amounts to much at the moment. What will amount to a lot is if they make mistakes going forward and those entanglements actually wind up turning into actual problems, the likes of which we saw with the running against the Clinton Foundation. If things like that start, concrete things like that start happening, I think it winds up being a terrible, terrible thing for.
Do you think that you should have been able to run as your dad's VP candidate?
No.
You were too young,
No.
granted. Way too young.
Well, I'm going to tell you two quick things. Number one, dirty little secret is family are always unofficial advisors in one way or another, no matter who you are. The American public was very well aware of the Trump's role and the family. Their kids were surrogates all across the campaign trail. My biggest problem with this is I don't like this feigned leftist outrage. If Chelsea Clinton were appointed to anything, probably including vice president, I think it would be applauded as feminism, and she's the next generation of Democrats. So don't aim your arrows at the Trump kids when I do not believe it would have ever been done with Chelsea Clinton.
All right, but what about Hillary Clinton when she was running health care in 1993, that big push for single payer?
That is a great question, but I actually want to go back to this idea about Chelsea, because in fact it was kind of nepotism, because she was running or helping run the foundation. And now we know through some of the emails that have come out that there were huge questions that even the FBI investigation was having about what was going on with the foundation and what was going on with the State Department, and questions about quid pro quo. So kind of maybe an unintended sort of roundabout nepotism with her being so heavily involved in the foundation.
I think that if Melania Trump is not going to be in the White House in a sort of advisor policy type position, that does open up a slot. I don't think that opens up 5 slots, meaning I don't think you can then have your daughter and her husband and their friends and their cousins. But I do think it's appropriate for, say, Ivanka Trump to take over what would be the First Lady's office and that role in the White House if that's what the president-elect wants.
I mean, obviously, it's a question.
That's a spot.
It's a question of trust, and a president probably feels they want people around them they can trust the most. That's why JFK had his brother be his attorney general. He was unqualified for the job. But what if Donald Trump feels that Jared Kushner is the most qualified and trustworthy person?
And if I was stocking my own cabinet and I was going to have a family member in a role, they would be the attorney general. That was a good move. You really want the nation's lawyer on your side.
How is this much different? I mean, if somebody doesn't have lots of children or children who are old enough to serve, like President Obama, how is this much different than Rahm Emanuel being his advisor inside the White House, and Desiree Rogers coming and running the social etiquette at the White House, and then, oopsie-daisy, having a state dinner get crashed because she really didn't know, I guess, what she was doing. I think that's what's come out.
They're not related.
They're not related.
I think that's the crucial difference.
But
they're close.
As you say, it is all about trust, and it's all about trust in all directions, including voters trust. Do they trust Donald Trump to handle the situation properly? And if he doesn't, all of those attacks that he leveled against Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and all that stuff is going to come back and bite him.
Yeah, and this is the thing about politics. Like, if you can't stand it on the other side, it's not okay for your side. And we all have to come to that mutual agreement in order for things to function a little bit better.
But then what's the fun?
Exactly. All right, President Obama, he's tons of fun, and he's been known to get some fawning coverage from the mainstream media, bless their bones, but that apparently, it just hasn't been enough. Now, in a new interview, he won't stop talking. The president says conservative media outlets have vilified him during his presidency. We will debate, we will discuss, we will return. Welcome back to Outnumbered. President Obama now blaming what he calls conservative media for creating what he says is a false picture of him and blaming its negative coverage for the drop in his poll numbers. The president telling The Atlantic, quote, "In 2008, I was never subjected to the kind of concentrated vilification of Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, the whole conservative media ecosystem. If people are angry that somehow the government is failing, then they are going to look to the guy who represents government." And that applies, by the way, even to some of the folks who are now Trump supporters. They're responding to a fictional character named Barack Obama, who they see on Fox News or who they hear about through Rush Limbaugh. Charlie, I've said this before. I'll say it again. You're the brand new editor of the opinion section of the Washington Times, which some would say is editorially conservative. I feel like this president has an unnatural obsession, almost a fetish with Fox News.
Yeah, and I don't think he watches it, because whatever he's watching is not what I watch, and I doubt he listens to Rush Limbaugh either. But the guy is so spoiled, and he's spoiled because he has always had this incredibly fawning coverage throughout his career career, even before when he was president. And then not only that, but he's going out of office with the highest numbers of any president.
Yeah, what is he talking about? These poll numbers are quite robust. Yeah. I mean, his poll numbers compared to the two major party candidates this election season, there was like a 13-point differential at one moment. And I loved reading the interview with Jan Wenner and him and Rolling Stone, where Jan Wenner was so upset that Hillary Clinton had lost and said when he went to the White House, it was like going to a wake. Come on.
His wife is on the cover of Vogue right now. I mean, they have gotten nothing but a big wet kiss from everyone in media, except I guess this network and Rush Limbaugh. But I'm sorry if I have outrage at the idea that you have funded terrorism with the Iran deal, that my grandchildren are probably going to end up having serious economic ramifications because of Obamacare. He has earned a lot of the criticism, and the idea that we're all just supposed to be like hacks like Chris Matthews talking about tingles running up our legs all day long. I find it really insulting, and I agree with you. I think he's a spoiled president who is used to just nothing but fawning coverage. And I'm sorry, but when he leaves office, it is going to be a sad, cold, hard look at reality, because of a lot of Americans, to put it nicely, are extremely displeased with how he has been as president.
Yeah, he's going to leave the bubble with far fewer tingles than when he arrived.
Remember that?
Yeah,
remember that?
I look at some of this, just kind of away from my face being pressed up against the glass so much. This is a man who knows that parts of his legacy are either never going to come to fruition, like closing Guantanamo Bay, unless he can get it done in the next few days. And then where are you going to put all those people that other countries won't take, which reportedly are the worst of the worst? This is a man whose name, it was Affordable Care Act, but even he calls it Obamacare. His name is on something that is going to be either repealed, replaced, massaged, whatever they're going to do. And then you've got the Iran deal. We still don't know what are in the side deals, and some of that becoming public and maybe tarnishing him even further. I think he's looking at this and saying, yes, I have huge approval ratings right now, but that other shoe that's about to drop is a Louboutin, and it weighs 15 pounds.
Yeah, but Bo Bergdahl, I mean, you could draw the Linnaean classification system for the number of terrorists who are being directly influenced by the prisoners who were swapped for that.
How about the largest refugee crisis since World War II? I mean, I could go on for the rest of this show talking about all his failures.
We could do a whole show about foreign policy failures and weaknesses that nobody believes that has been the strength of the Obama administration.
Because he never listened to your advice, Julia.
But I also think that maybe I take a more expansive view here than some, but I actually feel like it is the media. Okay, I'm a part of that, fine, because I hate when I watch TV and all these people are like, the media does this, and you're like, you are the media. So
some in the media.
Some in the media. It's the media's job to take on an approach of criticism and to critique the government. I feel like that is quite literally why the media exists. So the idea that there is not going to be criticism, almost criticism for criticism's sake, is a little bit of a fallacy. I think it's a really integral part of our democracy. And so complaining about it I think is just a useless, futile thing to do.
Yeah, he's almost done too. All right. But, there will be plenty of time and many books written about his policy failures. The end. A possible showdown looming. The so-called sanctuary cities continue to say they will defy President-elect Donald Trump over his illegal immigration policy. Will Mr. Trump keep his promise to strip their funding? Is it legal? Is it right? Can he do it? We'll discuss that next.
4 weeks from tomorrow, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the 45th president of the United States. And a possible showdown is looming large. So-called sanctuary cities are pushing back against Mr. Trump's illegal immigration policy, saying they will not cooperate with the feds when it comes to deporting some illegals. The latest big city stepping up those efforts is Los Angeles. Los Angeles Democratic Mayor Eric Garcetti announcing that the city will set aside $10 million to fund legal assistance for illegals. Half of that tab is being picked up by taxpayers. Mr. Trump has vowed to strip these sanctuary cities of federal funding once he takes office. So if I were a Los Angeles taxpayer, I would be livid right now. I don't understand what the left hasn't learned. Your side lost. People want there to be ramifications for people breaking the law and entering this country illegally.
And it's crazy because if they want to spend their money on that, have at it. Just as long as you don't spend any of my money on it, it doesn't really bother me. But this whole question about whether or not Donald Trump has the authority, or the federal government has the authority to strip funding from these sanctuary cities, they absolutely have that authority. And not only do they have the authority to strip that funding going forward, there's a good argument to be made that you can strip funding from the past where they have failed to enforce federal immigration laws. And remember, a big chunk of this money that they're talking about is money that goes to the localities, the cities or the counties, directly intended to enforce immigration laws. And so for them to then take that money, saying that we're going to use this to enforce immigration laws, and then fail to do it and refuse to do it and announce that they're going to refuse to do it, it's a little much. And I think that a lot of places are
a little
going to
much or law breaking.
It's law breaking, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, a little much is like I had too much lunch. I mean, law breaking is a whole other thing.
I'm not necessarily like defending that practice, but I don't know that it is illegal, because I think the entire premise, like LA, when they're proposing this new $10 million fund, I think their argument is we're trying to enforce immigration laws, but part of the immigration laws is people who are facing deportation and helping those people, financially.
So, Jillian, why not do it this way? Since half the money is coming from private donors for this, and half the money is coming from taxpayers, if they want to do what you say, then make it all come from private donors. Don't have any of it come from taxpayers. Then they can do whatever the heck they want.
Absolutely.
My point being, though, like when you're facing a deportation inquiry, I think the idea is that you're not allowed to work here and there's costs that you incur.
Right, so let private donors pay your bill.
Pay for that part. I don't know. I mean, but it's, again, the law.
If California taxpayers want to pay for that, let them pay for it. Just don't make the rest of us pay for it.
The problem is, in the case of like the woman in San Francisco, what if someone is shot and killed in these sanctuary cities? Like, you're not offering protection to citizens as well. Judge Napolitano was on Outnumbered earlier this week, and he was talking about this.
The president cannot force localities to do the job of the feds. The feds have to do it on their own. That's not me. That's the Supreme Court.
But he's threatening to withhold federal funding.
Okay, if he can only do that if the federal funding comes with strings attached, meaning he can't withhold federal funding that's already been budgeted. But in the first Donald Trump budget, he could say to Rahm Emanuel, you want your $1 billion? You want another $500 million for your schools? Here are the strings attached.
Kennedy, you were a Los Angeles resident for a long time. What do you make of that?
No, I agree that with what Harris said. I think that if there is so much interest in the private sector and on behalf of these humanitarian organizations to help people fight deportation, then they should. You've got a 20% chance of staying in the country if you fight without a lawyer and you go before an immigration judge. So that's why they're raising the money. And also, I don't have a problem being squeamish cutting federal funding for most things, let alone sanctuary cities. I think we need to be bold about many of the ways we withhold this.
Spoken like a strong libertarian. More Outnumbered in just a moment.
Thanks to Charlie Hurt and Jillian Turner. So good to have you both here.
Thank you.
So, as the new opinion page editor of the Washington Times, I just wanted to say that.
Yes. What this means is I'm allowed to edit everyone's opinion.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I get to edit my kid's opinion, my wife's, anybody.
Wow. That's a lot of power.
Hurt's so good.
Do they listen to you at home?
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Sarcasm. I love it. All right, we'll see you online. Happening now.